Now, let's go through the brain areas responsible for language. You already know Broca's area, which activates our muscles, tongue muscles and lips muscles when we pronounce the words. And there is also Wernicke's area. It is in the association auditory cortex on the left side of the brain, right here. It analyzes word sounds so we could understand what we hear, and it produces ongoing word sounds and grammatical structures. It means when we think about what you say, this area is responsible for finding the right words and putting them together in the sentences. Memory. Memory definition would be a storage and retrieval of information. We keep receiving information all the time. We see things, we touch things, we feel the touch, we hear different sounds, we can smell and taste. All that information that we receive from our sensory receptors goes to cerebral cortex for temporary storage, literally seconds, and most of it is permanently lost. Some data goes into our short-term memory, or it's also called working memory. It holds information for a short while, and it's limited to 7 or 8 pieces of information. What does that mean? If somebody tells you their phone number, you can repeat it immediately, and probably you can repeat it in a few seconds. But after a while, let's say if they ask you in several days, you won't be able to repeat it, with some exceptions. Exceptions when that short-term memory items go for storage into the long-term memory. How they go there? Through excitement. If you like some movie, you'll probably remember a lot of phrases and moments from that movie forever. Through rehearsal. That's how we study mostly. We repeat pieces of information and memorize it. And also through association of old and new data. So mnemonics can be a good example. Remember when you studied skin, there was a silly phrase, come let's get sunburned. What was that about? Layers of the epidermis. Corneum, L. lucidum, G. granulosum, spinosum, and basal layer. Using mnemonics, it's easy to memorize phrases. So that's an example of association of old and new data. There are 2 types of memories depending on what we memorize. Factual knowledge is called declarative memory. So we memorize facts. You remember, for example, that your cousin was born in 2005. And there is also procedural or non-declarative memory. It's when we memorize something by doing it. How to ride a bike, how to skate, how to type on the keyboard, how to draw, how to play the piano. That memory, those skills we usually keep throughout our life. It's more difficult to lose that data comparing with declarative memory. Now we'll talk about protection of the brain. The outside protection would be bone, skull. Inside there will be 3 layers of membranes made of connective tissue, and they are called meninges. There is also cerebrospinal fluid that works as a watery cushion and blood-brain barrier. So 3 layers of meninges. That is brain. That's your gray matter of the brain cortex. Here it is. There is a bone, skull, and in between there are 3 layers. Dura matter, which itself is made of 2 layers, 1 and 2. Then arachnoid matter right here, and this one is arachnoid matter, and finally pia matter. Dura matter, made of 2 layers, is the thickest and strongest layer. Inside, between those 2 layers, there will be dural sinuses. Those are large veins. Then we have arachnoid matter, and arachnoid matter has an extensions right here that look like a web, like a cobweb, like a spider web. So that's why it's called arachnoid. Arachna is spider. And there is a space right here between dura mater and between arachnoid and pia mater. In that space there will be cerebrospinal fluid and blood vessels. You need to know that. Finally, there is thin protection to the brain, pia mater. It's very delicate and thin layer. Cerebrospinal fluid, which is sitting inside of subarachnoid space, is mostly made of water, also has some proteins, ions, but no blood cells. Its function is to protect the central nervous system, brain, and it also goes around the spinal cord as a watery cushion against trauma and blows. And also it carries some chemicals necessary for the brain and nutrients. So right here is where cerebrospinal fluid is produced, ventricles of the brain. Remember, in the ventricles there are ependymal cells, and those ependymal cells, together with blood vessels, that is a substance called choroid plexus, producing cerebrospinal fluid. In two lateral ventricles, in the third ventricles, and in the fourth ventricles, that's where we have choroid plexus. Cerebrospinal fluid goes around the cerebellum, also goes down the central canal of the spinal cord and around the spinal cord all the way down, and then it returns and goes in subarachnoid space all around the brain, cushioning the brain, and finally it gets absorbed between two layers of dura mater into the venous sinuses. One more important moment that I missed: you also need to know the spaces. So one space between pia mater and arachnoid mater is called subarachnoid space. But there is tiny space also between arachnoid mater and dura mater, and it's called subdural space.